Hi everyone, and welcome to NCARB Live. I'm Samantha Miller, and I'm joined by two special guests today. We have Kevin Sneed, partner and senior director at OTJ Architects. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Thank you.
And we also have Harry Faulkner, who's NCARB's Director of Experience and Education.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So today we'll be covering tips for Architectural Experience Program supervisors. We'll also have plenty of time at the end to answer your questions, so if you have any, feel free to submit them on the screen using the Q&A chat tool. So before we get started, I was hoping each of you could tell us a little bit about yourselves and your role. Kevin, we'll start with you.
My name is, as you know, Kevin Sneed. I'm Senior Director of Architecture with OTJ Architects. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. Hopefully you don't notice by my accent. But I've been in the Washington, D.C. area for the past 30 years and love it. Yeah.
And you're also a member of the Maryland Architecture Board.
Yes, I am. I've been with the Maryland State Board of Architectural Review for the past, 3 years. And then I was part of the Interior Design Board for another 3 years. So I was still active on doing architecture. So.
Thank you.
So I'm Harry Faulkner, Director of Experience and Education here at NCARB, as Sam has already mentioned. I'm also a licensed architect in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Have a good number of years of practice behind me before I came to the council, and have had a good number of years also of supervising candidates for licensure through my career. So it was a nice transition over here, and been working with the council almost 13 years now to help try and make this process better for you all. So good to be here today.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you to all of our supervisors who are joining us. We can see that we have supervisors from London, Boston, New York, all over the place. So thank you again for joining us. So to start, let's talk about the role of architects. Specifically, Harry, I was hoping that you could share an overview of NCARB's expectations about the role of an AXP supervisor.
Great. So I think the first thing I'd like to share with you all, and I think probably it's the most important piece of the program in general of being a supervisor, is we truly expect you to understand and have read at least the AXP guidelines, the Architectural Experience Program guidelines. I'll tell you, it's a simple read. If you haven't read it lately, I highly encourage it because, again, it is the core of everything you need to know about being a supervisor and supervising candidates for licensure today. One of the things that we really do like to point out to supervisors is your role is truly to not just supervise, but also to mentor candidates. I'd like you to think about who taught you, who helped you get to where you're at today, and think about how they helped you develop your competencies. AXP describes those competencies that are expected today of an architect as they're getting their license. So that would be part of it. The other things we really expect is for you to be fair. We want you to be upfront. We want you to be, like I've already said, mentors, but we also want you to be coaches and good coaches to your candidates because, you know, we all want to get better at what we're doing. I know your candidates do, and I really do feel these are probably the most core pieces that you can keep in mind. Coaching, understanding the program, and helping them develop the competency to be a good architect.
Thanks, Harry. So, Kevin, as a leader at your firm, how do you approach being a supervisor, and how do you see your role?
Well, we started maybe about 2 years ago reestablishing the OTJ standards and actually creating a way in which we can actually incorporate mentorship as well as becoming the AXP supervisor. And so we started the professional development program, and with that, every person who is hired within OTJ, we make sure that they have a mentor. And within that, if the person is still going, who is part of the AXP, or I call them, we actually look into their research and make sure that what things they need into becoming to pass their AXP program reports. And so I actually not only look for them for a mentor, but also make sure that they have their supervisor to make sure that they report all the information that's needed. And so through that program and through the professional development, we create that whole thing for everyone. So it works out perfectly.
That's wonderful. So as a member of the Maryland Architecture Board, has that shifted the way that you approach being a supervisor?
Yes, it has. Having that experience, reviewing all the potential candidates to take the exam, really helped me out to look at the supervisors or even look at myself to make sure that the people that I look into and look at the research and look at their reports, that they're complying with the standards of NCARB.
Great. So let's talk briefly about the process of reviewing and approving or perhaps returning experience reports. Harry, what tips do you have for supervisors as they navigate that process?
So hopefully all of you on the show today actually have had some experience recently and realized how we have really changed the processes here in the council, particularly through the electronic opportunity to actually put the hours in. First tip, as I would hope, and when we're out talking to people in general, is making sure that, I hope as a supervisor, each of you is familiar with the work that your individual, your candidate is actually doing. With that in mind, your reviews, I think, really should be fairly easy of exactly the work they're doing. So if you're working with your candidates on a regular basis, you know the amount of work they're doing. They're going to input their hours, and you're going to see that you're going to get a notification from NCARB that lets you know that they have actually input hours and asked for your approval. Pretty easy. Go in. You've established a thing. Do you want me to get into real details of exactly the process, Sam, or more of the overall?
An overview, and if
overview?
Supervisors have specific questions, we can address those during the Q&A
On the
portion.
process,
Yeah.
okay. So basically, once you have those hours in there, it's always extremely good to actually meet with your candidate. We want you to meet with them on a regular basis. I think, I'm hopeful that the review is fairly simple, but the purpose of meeting with the candidate is really to find out what else do they need. What are the next steps? They've completed this set of work for you already, and you're familiar with the competencies that they are developing when they're working with you. So what extra areas do they need? Where do you need to push them? Where do you need to help them grow? One of the key pieces we're asked on a regular basis is, well, what happens if you don't agree with it? Well, there are different processes in place where, in fact, you can revise and resubmit. So if you're meeting with your candidate and they don't actually have things the way you've seen things, and you want to talk to them and to work with them on changing some of their expectations, then you would actually just click on review and resubmit. It's that simple these days. The one thing we do warn every supervisor when we're talking with you all is the fact that you should only reject a submission if you mean that you don't ever want them to have that experience counted. Because once you reject any type of an experience, if you actually use the reject, it means that you would have to call into the council's office and actually have that reversed so that the actual candidate could send in new hours in that period of time. So that's pretty serious. Keep that in mind, it can be reversed. And I will tell you that the system is designed to ask you 2 or 3 times to make sure you really mean it. But I don't think most of you actively supervising, you shouldn't even need to consider that reject button.
And for those of you who are just starting out as supervisors, NCARB has step-by-step instructions on how to review and approve these reports on our website. So, Kevin, what process do you go through if a licensure candidate at your firm submits a report to you for review?
Well, first of all, I'd like for them to tell me in person, because every time I get my emails, I pretty much go into spam, or I'm not focusing on it yet. So I think I echo what Harry was saying, is that the candidate have to come to me and we discuss the actual process. Then from there, we go over it, whether he or she actually showed me their timesheets or their information. A lot of people actually show me their timesheets to make sure, because we do that 6 months at a time, and they don't remember all the time of work in which they have done thus far. So they show me that, and as well, I talk to the mentor that they have in my office to make sure they're going the actual direction, or the right direction. And then from that point, I look at it and approve it. It's really that simple. Coming to me, show me the information. I'm aware of the information they're providing me, and then from that, I just approve it.
Great.
So I think Kevin mentioned something just now about reporting in every 6 months. Prior to the show, we were talking a little bit, and he said he's even had one of his candidates in his office reporting weekly. Again, it's between you and your candidate what you decide when you decide really what that proper and appropriate reporting is. Because everybody can enter their hours daily now, and in their development of their competency can be reporting the whole time, they can pretty much do it any time. In fact, they could do it on a daily basis. But again, it's up to you and your candidate really to decide what's the appropriate and the most convenient method for you two to work with.
Right. On the average, I have at least once a month. The person that was doing it once a week is no longer in our office.
I always encourage people to do it often and frequent, and as often, again, I'm going to keep using the word often, but as quickly as possible and as soon as possible in any case.
Great. So it sounds like when a candidate submits their experience report to you for review, it's an opportunity to have a conversation about their progress and what areas they might need more experience in. And I'd also like to remind our supervisors about the reporting requirement. Harry, would you like to briefly explain?
Yeah, so there's a reporting requirement, and there's been a lot of controversy through the years about that reporting requirement as to why it exists. But to clarify that existence of what has been historically known as the 6-month reporting rule, it was truly to develop a relationship between the supervisor and the candidate. That wasn't happening in the past. And again, to be a good supervisor, you got to be working. You heard Kevin say he makes his candidates come in and talk to him. Again, that is the relationship that we want to build. So the reporting policy is a candidate can get 100% credit for the work that they've done over the past 8 months technically. It's a 6-month reporting things. It's a 6-month report, but the candidate has up to 2 months after submitting that 6 months of experience to report that and actually submit it to you all as a supervisor. One thing we're still finding, which a lot of people don't realize, is the fact that we will accept experience up to 6 months, up to 5 years old, meaning between 8 months old and 5 years old. And in that period of time, we will give the candidate half credit for the experience that they report. So there's two different methods out there, but we're hearing still some people don't realize that experience is up to 5 years old does still count, and it's important to get it in.
So to recap, you have an 8-month window. And anything beyond that 8-month window and up to 5 years in the past can get 50% credit.
Yes.
Great. So over the past few years, NCARB has been working on improving our resources for supervisors. So Kevin, what are some of the resources that you found most helpful as you're guiding candidates at your firm through licensure?
There are two, to me, I consider the most important ones. One is the AXP guidelines. Actually, that's a very good resource regarding not only for the candidate, or I call them the XPers, but also the supervisor and the mentor. Go into the website actually and access it, and actually I have it as a bookmark for me because of my my relationship right now with the students and everything. So from that point, that really helped me out, and I use that a whole lot. And then from that point, I use the licensing requirement tool, and that's something which I use based upon my background with the Maryland Board of Architects. There are certain requirements not only with the NCARB, but also with different states' requirements for licensure.
Great.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
So Harry, what are some other newer resources that NCARB's developed that supervisors might find helpful?
One we have for you coming out this afternoon, I believe, is something that people have asked for a long time now. So we have actually created a new document referred to as a supervisor candidate expectations outline. Considered a Bill of Rights. You're familiar with those in a lot of different organizations. So we're really excited about that right now. It sort of gives you an idea of, number one, what you can expect of your candidate and what candidates can expect of you, which is, again, I can't stress enough that supervising, you already heard Kevin say, it's reverse mentoring in cases too already. So the relationship that you build with your candidate is important. But you have expectations also. And the candidate has the right, or the XP, as Kevin's calling them, has the right to expect your certain behaviors and certain time frames, et cetera, to actually get back to them in trying to help them, as well as you actually can have expectations of your candidates also.
So we have a lot of these great resources on our website at ncarb.org/supervisors. So be sure to check out the AXP guideline, Kevin's favorite resource, and the expectations flyer, our brand new resource. So for the next 30 to 45 minutes, we have time to answer all of your questions. So again, if you have any, just type them in on your screen. So our first question comes from Cameron. Thank you for joining us. He'd like to know, do we have the ability to approve a portion of the report and disapprove of another portion, or just send back the entire report for review?
Do we take that one? Have you tried to do that before?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
That's a good one.
It is a good one. Good question, Cameron. That's actually the case where you would use revise and resubmit. Again, if you're having that conversation with your candidate, you should explain to them which portion you have an issue with, and then you would actually hit revise and resubmit, and they would have to redo the whole report. They would have to modify the report. They would have to redo the whole report, but you would have to actually modify part of that report, and then they would resubmit.
So we recommend returning.
Return for edits.
Yeah, return for edits.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Let me make sure the terminology, it's return for edits.
Return for
Okay.
edits.
Return for edits.
So our next question comes from David. They worked on a project a few years ago with an architect who was licensed in California but has since moved to Florida. But that project was in a different state altogether. So how should they input their info on the supervisor page? So I think this is a question about whether or not the supervising architect needs to be licensed in the state where the project is taking place.
Yeah.
If I'm interpreting that correctly.
I guess with my answer is that the person doesn't have to be in that state to become licensed. They just have to be licensed overall. I mean, there are some occasions where you can don't have to be licensed, but in this particular situation, as long as they're licensed in a particular state, they can submit it that way. Whether it's in California or whether it's in Florida, it doesn't really matter.
As long as they're licensed in a U.S. jurisdiction
Yes.
or a Canadian province, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Great.
With the exception, I'm going to go ahead and add.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and add. In New York, if you are getting experience in New York, you must have an architect supervisor who is licensed in the state of New York. So as if you're physically working in New York and you're planning on getting a New York license, you must have a supervisor who is licensed in New York.
And if you ever have questions like these, you can visit that licensing requirements tool that Kevin is
Yeah.
fond of on NCARB's homepage, or you can call your state licensing board directly. So there's a follow-up question. I think this candidate might be wondering where they're licensed now or where they were at the time of experience.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
It's-
matter.
Yeah, as long as you're licensed, that's what counts.
Okay. Our next question's from Marvin. Could you please provide a quick example of practice management and project management? So I think some tasks that might fall under those two experience areas.
The practice management is the actual concept of going through the actual phases of the project, whether it's the contractual portion of it or even if actually the actual relationship with the client. That's why I consider it as more of the practice management portion. The project management is more the holistic of the project itself, your relationship with the entire client, the contractual, and as well as the your relationship with your colleagues on getting that project through. So to me, that's the whole management process. It's all part of the leadership level in which we have at OTJ on trying to give people leadership talent to make sure they move forward.
And I encourage you also to go and look at the AXP guidelines again. The actual tasks that are related to those two subject areas are actually listed. So it's the tasks that have been identified that one needs to be competent in to practice architecture independently. So I would go back to the AXP guidelines if that's not, if Kevin's answer is if you need more from that. So there's a lot of different pieces involved in each of them.
Yeah.
Am I required to approve all experience reports?
Can I get a little bit more clarification? All or?
As a supervisor, do I have to approve experience reports? I think this gets back to our earlier conversation about this being an opportunity to start a conversation with your candidate, and if you don't think that the report accurately portrays the work that they did under your supervision, then you can return it for edits.
Yes.
If I finished reporting my hours and reached the required hours, do I have to keep reporting my hours until I get my license? It's a good question.
It's an excellent question. That's really going to depend on the state. We still have 4 or 5 jurisdictions that require 5,600 hours. They have not actually adopted the AXP Streamline, although 3 of those 4 that I'm aware of are actually working towards that change. We are encouraging individuals right now to go ahead and report up to 5,600 hours just to make sure you're covered in any jurisdiction. We don't know, it could change in the future, but for now, we suggest you just keep reporting.
I tend to agree with Harry because in the state of Maryland, you're required to have, in addition to the 3740, we also have additional 4 to 5 years of experience. Depends on your education level.
Yeah.
So depending on your education level and depending on the state, it actually you can add as many as you want to, but it makes it a lot easier for me actually when I review that and it all comes from one space versus it comes from AXP, NCARB, and then it comes from somewhere else as far as based upon someone else signing the information. So you still have that option, but I like it coming from one source, which you already paid for anyway through NCARB, so it makes it more convenient for me.
Yeah, Kevin mentioned that licensing requirements tool that you found on our website. That's a great place again to go and find out exactly what can happen. If you got your NAB accredited program, do you really have to do it? No, but we really highly encourage right now as more and more jurisdictions come on board, and also for those jurisdictions, depending on your education, how many extra years of experience you might need.
So that was a good question. So good idea to just keep reporting your hours, particularly if you want to earn a reciprocal license in a state that has additional requirements.
Yes.
What is the difference between a supervisor and a mentor? That's a good question.
Well, let me start on that. The supervisor to me, well, let me start with the mentor. The mentor to me is a person that that comes to you, either whether or not he's your same age or same experience, is someone that's able to give you guidance through that whole process. A person that's actually been through the actual process through architecture and is very familiar with the AXP process. Whereas the supervisor, actually the person who has that experience, but he also in addition to he records or actually approves of the information that you submit to him in those reports. So, and actually advise you on information that you need to improve on or you need to work on from that point.
I think that was a great explanation. The only thing I'd like to add to that is in NCARB world, both mentors and supervisors must be licensed. And there are examples where mentors can sign off on certain experience opportunities. So again, in both cases. And you mentioned something earlier, Kevin, that I really am very passionate about, is the reverse mentoring and working with your candidates and your ex-peers and you're learning from them, because I think that's an important part of the whole process. So everyone can be a mentor to each other.
That's very true. I have a colleague in my office who was showing she has the information regarding how she reports on her phone, in addition to how she reports it on the computer. I didn't realize that that information was available, but I'm learning from her as well as providing the information where it gives me to share the information with everyone else. So in that mentorship, that really helps me out and actually share the wealth of information.
Yeah, and what Kevin's talking about is that AXP app that your candidates can download, and they can keep track of their experience as they gain it and gain those competencies right along every 15 minutes or so during the day if they want to. So it's a great tool, but we have also heard this individual is doing exactly what we've heard from others. They come up and they say, hey, here's my app. Here's where I need hours. This is what I need you to work on. So it's important that way that you can share it in much more real time than actually picking up a laptop or logging into the system if they're all fixed and stuff like that. So there's lots of new opportunities with that.
Very convenient.
And again, that's called the MyAXP app. It's free in the Apple Store and Google Play. Our next question comes from Dina. She'd like to know if teaching architecture counts toward the AXP.
It no longer counts. That was in the old IDP program back when it was 5,600 hours, and so that actually was removed from an opportunity. Those were part of what was known in the past as elective hours. Those elective hours no longer exist. So once we eliminated the 1,860 hours, which were elective, teaching architecture went away.
James has a question for licensure candidates who perhaps are studying abroad in another country. It can sometimes be hard to find an AXP supervisor who is licensed in a U.S. jurisdiction. Do you have any advice?
Absolutely. Under Experience Setting O, you can earn up to 1,860 hours working under an architect credentialed in a foreign country as your AXP supervisor. So if you go through the AXP guidelines to Experience Setting O, you will see in there that foreign architects do count. So again, it has to be an architect in the country where you are practicing, and that person has to be licensed and or credentialed to practice architecture in that country. But yes, you can earn up to half of the required hours in AXP by through a foreign architect. So I really suggest you look at all the different categories under O also, because there's other opportunities in there also if they can't find a U.S. architect, or if they're not working with one. Again, let me sort of clarify that one doesn't just find a supervisor. So supervisors are the people you're working with. So I have to make sure I clarify on that, because You can't be walking down the street and saying, "Are you my supervisor?" So we got to be careful of that.
So there's a follow-up question from James, which I think you may have just answered. Is it appropriate to ask a supervisor in a U.S.-based office, so let's say it's an international firm, can you ask a U.S. licensed architect in a U.S.-based firm to sign off on your hours abroad?
James, if, I'm going to have to ask the question, are you speaking of someone who's still in the U.S. and then they're in a foreign country? If that's the question, so you've got your candidate in a foreign country, you've got your AXP supervisor in a U.S. jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
The only way that would really work is if that supervisor is truly overseeing the work that the individual is doing over in the other country.
That's interesting because I'm wondering if you have any advice for people who perhaps are teleworking. So does that change the definition of the direct supervision?
No, because you're still overseeing the work of that individual.
Absolutely. I mean, in this modern day and time, about a quarter of my office actually does teleworking or work remotely.
Absolutely.
And actually, one of my colleagues, she's a mother, and she actually has kids, and we actually go back and forth as far as and do.
That's great.
What is that program that you use where you both see the information that you provide? I guess there's several social media type of information you can do that, but we look on the screen and look at her screen as far as what she has, and that's actually helpful for me on doing that information, on gathering it and everything.
So direct supervision doesn't necessarily mean
In the same
physical
location.
proximity.
Right.
So that's good to know.
Again, if the individual in the U.S. is overseeing the work, then absolutely.
Okay.
So that's a good question.
James, hopefully that answered your questions. If not, feel free to shoot us a follow-up one.
Yeah, please.
So our next question is from Otto. What are some efficient ways to start earning AXP hours while in school? Good question.
I mean, short of actually working for an architectural firm during the school time, you can actually get certain levels of actually exposure from donating your time through volunteering. I mean, there's still a certain amount of hours which you can achieve through that volunteering. There's programs like being a volunteer through hip-hop architecture or doing stuff like that goes towards your AXP hours. But even doing construction to a certain degree. Yeah. But not doesn't encompasses the entire ones, because there's still certain areas which you need that supervision from a licensed architect while you're still in school. So there's a certain level, certain numbers hours which you can achieve.
So these types of examples would likely fall under the setting O.
Yes.
Yeah, setting O.
Setting O.
Another good one, if you are in school and you're able to work construction, we have opportunities for people to actually go out and do construction. That is also under O. There's a few other things like attending AIA, HSW qualified learning, but again, for that one right now, you need to either be a member of AIS or be a member of AIA as an associate member to earn HSW credit there. And there's a few other options out there. There's other jobs, even if you're not in a firm. Again, I'm not sure whether they're talking employment cases or not. What Kevin was talking about is volunteering. That's also a great way to get involved. And again, if you're at a school, by the way, and if you're in school and they have an AIS chapter and they have a Freedom by Design chapter, we highly encourage individuals in school and students to get involved in that, because you can earn credit through that process also. So Freedom by Design for AIS is important.
And if you ever have questions about specific experiences and whether or not those count toward the AXP, feel free to give us a call or send us an email through our website. So we have a customer relations team who is more than happy to help walk through those opportunities with you. We have a question from Noah. Do the hours submitted under setting O count toward the 3,600 required hours? So the AXP requires 3,740 hours. So let me back up. Do the hours under setting O count towards the AXP's required hours, or does it count toward the additional hours from the old IDP? Does that make sense? So setting O.
Yeah.
Setting O does count towards the 3,740. So in other words, you can do 1,860 hours under the supervision of an architect in a firm, which is A, and you can do the other 1,860 hours in setting O. So that's important.
So Noah, the AXP now requires 3,740 hours.
Yep.
So our next question comes from Anna. Can you have more than one mentor to record AXP hours?
Mentor, yes. Actually, both. You can have more than one mentor as well as more than one supervisor. Depends on the project. I guess with me, again, like in my office, we have a specific mentor that they can go to, but they have other mentors that they relate to. And again, it doesn't matter whether or not they're the same age or the same experience. It's always good to have someone to have a variety and diverse experience, but in my office, as well as my experience with other people, they have more than just one. Like everybody in my office, I consider more or less a mentor because I'm learning a lot from everyone.
And so, Anna, if you're, I think that really applies to mentor, but Anna, if you're talking about the supervisor, many people, you already heard Kevin say that it's true. You can have more than one person acting as your supervisor in the same firm. The ultimate supervisor-candidate relationship is really going to be based on who you're working with and working on those projects together. So if you're working on 2 or 3 different projects, you may actually have multiple supervisors in that firm. You just can't double dip. You can't claim the work twice or 3 times over multiple supervisors. But yes, and Kevin, I think you just said something that's really important. We all have mentors and have had mentors, tons of them. I still have mentors in my life and have many different ones because they all meet a different requirement. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Thank you. Good question. Lewis says that there's no licensed architect at the construction company he works as a drafter, where he works as a drafter. Can he ask the architect generating the project design to be his supervisor?
So if you're working for a construction company that is, in fact, you're working for them, you actually need, in that case, to have your supervisor at the construction company sign off on your experience hours that you've gained. So that is under work setting O, or experience setting O. So the answer is no, you can't ask the architect to do that. You have to ask the actual supervisor you have in the construction company.
But it's good to know that some of those hours do still count toward the AXP.
Absolutely.
Can I be an AXP supervisor if I'm licensed but do not hold an NCARB certificate? Good question.
Yes. But yes.
Absolutely. We do not require that you be NCARB certified. However, I must say we do encourage it.
Oh, absolutely.
But no, you don't have to be.
Our next question comes from Greg. How do we deal with the quality and breadth of experience in the context of the reporting process? So are there guidelines for the appropriate quality and breadth of experience? This might get to the tasks.
Yeah, it gets to the tasks.
Yeah.
Kevin, what are you looking for when people come and talk to you about their reports? We're talking competency. We're talking about gaining competency. So I think that's where I'm hearing this question going in that direction.
Yeah, a lot of things in which when I look at it, I look at the competency of how they do it. I love that word competence. I mean, we're not looking for a scholarly person who actually achieved like high scores and become a star architecture. We're looking for a person that's able to obtain a certain level of competence on achieving the AXP reports and improving those reports. What I do, and I normally say to every lot of people, is that I trust what they provide me, but I just verify what they showed me and just look at the reports. I just want to add that because I do trust a lot of people, but I verify. I know it's a quote from, I believe, Ronald Reagan, but I believe in it. So trust but verify.
And I will add that we get that question a lot when we're developing the current version of AXP and having these conversations. You as supervisors, and I've been told by supervisors, so all the ones who worked with us to develop this, our volunteers, I actually asked the question of a whole lot of supervisors. You pretty much know when somebody's working for you whether or not they're competent or not, or whether they're developing that competency, because I'll even nip out of the bud too, you don't earn the hours after you've become competent, you earn the hours as you're developing your competency. So I think it's really important to keep in mind, as an employer and somebody who hires and works with people and acts as a supervisor, you know whether that person's actually developing those competencies or not. It's not about, like you just said, it's not the A level or B level or C level. It's a competency, because what all of our programs are stressing and striving towards is that competency to practice architecture independently at that point of licensure.
Good advice. Our next question is from Michelle. One of our employees is a foreign educated applicant going through the AXP. Are the required hours different for them?
No.
I agree. No. It's all the same.
Can I review experience reports without paying for an NCARB record?
We're testing Kevin here.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. This is a test round.
Well, no, because you have to have a NCARB record in order to provide that information.
So, this is about the supervisor, right, Sam?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So,
okay. Sorry.
no, the supervisor does not have to pay and have an NCARB record.
No. I was thinking on the student side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you want to be an AXP supervisor or assigned to be an AXP supervisor, you can sign up for a free NCARB account. So just go to ncarb.org and you can review and approve experience reports through what's called an NCARB account. Oh, my candidate submitted a report, but I have not yet received an email notification. What should I do?
That's a good question. Actually, it happened to me. A candidate actually told me that they submitted, and I looked through my spam mail and everything else, and it wasn't there. But I had to call up NCARB in order to get the information and make sure that it was very convenient, actually, to reach out to them and tell the report, and it was found out that she put in the information correctly, but she didn't press the button for approval for me to approve it.
Yep.
So, and that actually was pretty costly because of the 5-year mark, too, on some of her work.
It's actually something very important to candidates. You need to make sure your candidate understands while they're recording the hours, they are being saved in our system. However, until they actually click submit and send it to the supervisor, they're not at the supervisor. It's that actual transaction in the system where you say, please send this, or request approval, whatever the actual words are in there now, is the moment where it actually goes to the supervisor. And it's that point, which we get the question all the time too, is, are my hours saved? Once it goes to the supervisor, the hours are safe. They are in there. But if, say, for example, somebody goes through and puts in their experience hours for a whole year but never hits submit, that means they're outside the 6-month reporting rule, and that means they would actually only be given credit, half credit, for those hours that are 8 months and older. So it's important that the candidate understands they have to complete the transaction.
Yeah, please submit. I mean,
Yes,
gathering
you
information
have
is
to
one
submit.
thing. Yeah, gathering information is one thing, but pressing the button for submit is another.
So we have a question about the AXP portfolio option. So before I ask this question, can you explain what the AXP portfolio option is for those of our viewers who may not have heard of it?
Okay, so we do have an option called the AXP Portfolio. That is a program that's not, I was going to say it's fairly new, but it's actually fairly new, but it's almost 3 years old at this point. We're looking at ways that we could help individuals who may have left the profession for whatever reason, and or maybe chose not to become an architect at one point, meaning being licensed. And they have experience that was older than 5 years in the past. So many examples could be somebody leaving to raise a family, take care of a family member. Actually, many of us know people in our firms that we worked in where they said, hey, I just don't want to be an architect, but they keep working in the same firm and just decide not to be. But then all of a sudden they decide that, oh, I really do want to become an architect. So we didn't want to leave those people out either. So we developed a program called the AXP Portfolio that is an option for individuals who could have completed the AXP program, formerly IDP, over 5 years ago for all the rules that are in place now. And it's a way for them to demonstrate to us and to our state boards that they have actually had the experience necessary that is related to AXP of today. So it's for a very specific group of individuals. One of the things to know is you cannot combine. You can't do part AXP hours and part portfolio. You have to choose one or the other. And in many cases, we're finding really quickly that most people can still go back and claim their experience up to 5 years old and complete the AXP. So it's a very specific process and a very specific need for those individuals.
So this option is really for individuals who have been in the field for a bit of time and perhaps they've reached a point in their career where it's no longer feasible for them or they're
Absolutely, that's
unable
a
to
really
do the traditional reporting. And again, that's called the AXP portfolio. So Natalia's question is, how in-depth does the portfolio need to be? Is it completely up to their supervising architect?
So the portfolio process is fairly in-depth. the actual candidates, and this is all outlined on our website, I believe. Yes, it is. I didn't know whether it was before you actually submit or once you're approved to a portfolio as part of the instructions. The candidate actually has to include documentation in the portfolio that describes their competence in all 96 tasks that are identified in the AXP. So it's a fairly in-depth portfolio, what we've seen so far. The candidate does work directly with the supervisor to determine what needs to be in there, but again, the candidate must address and acknowledge that they have submitted information, and you as a supervisor will have to acknowledge that they have included in their portfolio enough information for you to assess that they are competent in those 96 tasks.
Thank you. So one candidate says they work an average of 45 to 50 hours a week, and when they report their experience, and so they end up reporting their experience in bulk. Is it questionable to see hundreds of hours reported at a time? Have you had this happen to you, Kevin?
Yes. That's why I recommend actually submitting your reports at least between 3 months or 6 months at a time. But when it's a bulk, like when I first meet somebody and and they haven't submitted for quite some time, let's say a year, and they're submitting the whole information, it does take a little bit longer for me to review and to understand the actual dynamics of the actual report. But the answer is yes, I'll review it. It may take a little bit longer for me to approve it, but it's no problem. As long as I discuss with them in the process and how many hours in each of the divisions, then it's not that much of a problem.
Thank you.
Report often,
Yes.
approve often.
My firm doesn't have a lot of opportunities for candidates in all AXP areas. What can I do to help my candidate complete the AXP?
So Kevin, if you had somebody in this situation, Kevin's firm is pretty much a all-service
Yeah,
firm, so full-service firm. So what would you do in the case of what have you known other individuals possibly to do
Well,
to help their candidates out?
it's funny. I'll add a little caveat to that. I did have a person that actually have used that as a tool for them to get promoted to at least a certain level of the career in architecture. And another person actually went up to the actual client and said that I need these hours in order for me to stay in the firm. And it's a unique tool, and actually they understood, the client understood, or their employer understood clearly. So that actually can be used as a tool for actually promoting yourself as having certain responsibilities in order for you to achieve your goal of getting your AXP hours. The other one is actually, like I said before, is volunteering, and to a certain degree to a volunteer organization. That's the way you're doing it as well. I know that Eric probably have other ideas as well on doing
Well, we do have the other categories. So there are opportunities again to, for example, if it's a site visit issue going out on a construction site, we have site visits with mentors. We have different opportunities. There are again a certain amount for AI courses that count for HSW, which does again require that you're either a member of AIS or AIA as an associate member. I would encourage you as a supervisor, encourage all of you as supervisors to look very carefully at the tasks that are required in AXP. Because I think in doing that, I know there's certain areas that can be difficult, but I think most of you could probably figure out a way that you could help that person get some experience, even if it's sitting down and having sessions with them. And again, think about what that task is really requiring. I'm going to use an example of one that we get a lot of questions on, believe it or not, but it is true. I've had a number of individuals come to me when we're out doing outreach saying one of the tasks in AXP is to identify or be competent in the ability to apply principles of historic preservation. So apply principles of historic preservation. Many people a number of people actually have come to me and said, there's no way I'm going to do that. So does that mean I can't pass or I can't complete AXP because I can't complete that one? But the answer to that is, you talk about what you would have to do. So the level of competence in that case in something that specific could be understanding that, hey, I just walked in this building, it looks like there's some historic fabric in there or something. You need to call somebody in. So that's part of the competence that we experience as architects. It may not be that you're fully
involved.
involved in the actual piece to it, but it's knowing who to call and getting the right people in and bringing the people together to make sure it actually happens.
Right.
So we have time for about 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Ooh.
So a few people asked about working for themselves, but they're not licensed. So for example, if you have your own company, how can you earn hours toward the AXP? They don't have anyone else working with them.
You can't.
Yeah.
I'll cut to the chase. You just can't.
You still need a supervisor. You still have a friend who's a mentor, but I don't think that'll work. I mean, that's the whole breaks up the whole process of the whole NCARB process of understanding what you need to do. So
This is about learning and gaining your competency through working with another architect. So, again, if you're working for yourself and there's nobody else, you just can't do it.
Lewis would like to know if foreign architect supervisors need to provide documentation of their registration.
We ask for their registration number when you sign up as an AXP supervisor
for that state.
for that jurisdiction, for that country that you're in. Yes.
So we're just about out of time, but before we head out, I was hoping that both of you could share a key takeaway, your number 1 tip for AXP supervisors.
I would say actually go to the website, actually look into some of the resources that supply, even the blogs or the YouTube. Having those resources help me out to learn and to understand the whole processes of being a supervisor. On top of that, I can say as little or as much as possible in regards to mentors. Whether it's a mentor who is older than you or younger than you or even your same age, you need to have that information or have that resource for you to actually share. And I think that's, to me, is very important to even a mentor or even even me. I even have like 3 or 4 mentors, but supervisors are actually part of that, and it works out very well for me.
Thank you, Kevin.
So for me, key takeaway, be fair, be honest, be a great mentor, as Kevin said. Be ethical, be a good listener. That goes a long way. And as a supervisor, think about how you were supervised and how you got there to where you're at today. And think about the people who helped you, the people who didn't help you, and use all those tools that you've learned from others.
I echo that.
Well, thank you so much, Harry, and a special thank you to Kevin for joining us as well. And thank you to all of our viewers and
Yes.
supervisors out there. Remember that you can get resources on the Architectural Experience program as well as how to be a great supervisor at ncarb.org/supervisors. So we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.